Welcome in to another edition of The Locker Room. I'm your host, Cade Crenshaw, joined today by our special guest, Connor Fisher. Connor, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
Tell us a little bit about you and where you're from.
Well, I'm a junior, and I'm from outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
A nice Philly cheesesteak maybe in your background.
Oh, yes.
Well, today we're talking about the AFC breakdown for this upcoming NFL season that gets going coming up tomorrow night as the Houston Texans take on the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. And we'll start out on the AFC East, which has the most question marks. Not only is Tom Brady no longer a New England Patriot, but I think two teams in that division are in rebuild mode right now. For me, at least, this is an exciting time to be a Buffalo Bills fan.
Absolutely. I mean, they've got a really great roster. They made a big addition in Stephon Diggs. Now Josh Allen can use the arm that really is only second to Pat Mahomes in arm strength, and they've got that defense. I mean, the only other team that could really make a challenge has always been New England, but right now, I'm not sure.
And this is a Bills team that's made the playoffs in 2 of the last 3 seasons. I think the biggest question mark for me offensively for the Bills has got to be Josh Allen. Is can he keep his poise and use that arm strength, like you said, to his advantage? Because sometimes we've seen while he has a plethora of weapons, like you mentioned, including adding Diggs in the offseason, is the weight is going to be on Allen's shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely, but I mean, he's going to be in, I think, his 3rd season in the pros. I mean, he's got to evolve, he's got to get coached better, but a lot of quarterbacks do start improving after a little bit of time in the league, and I think Allen's got all the chances to make that big leap into true stardom.
And you mentioned that defense as well. Tre'Davious White back in the secondary, an incredible player, just got a huge contract extension just a few weeks ago. And I think the defensive tackle Ed Oliver is poised to have a big sophomore season, maybe a breakout player in the AFC.
Oh, absolutely. I liked Ed Oliver when he was down in Texas playing college football for Houston. I thought it was a really great pick at 10th overall. I really liked it. And honestly, I think he can be, the rock of that front 7 for the next 10 years. For Buffalo.
Now, the only, I would say, true contender for Buffalo in this division, New York, they're still in a rebuilding move with the Jets. And as far as the Dolphins go, they have Tua, but he's not starting just quite yet. Now, the big question mark is obviously going to be those New England Patriots. No more Tom Brady, but another NFL MVP has stepped into that starting role for Bill Belichick, and that's Cam Newton. What do you expect from Newton this year as he's now in New England? How do you expect this new makeup of the Bill Belichick era to go?
Well, honestly, I'm not sure. I mean, my expectations for Cam Newton aren't exactly high after an injury-riddled season, but he was a former NFL MVP. He still has a lot of veteran experience, and he can run the ball, which is a facet of the offense that Bill Belichick has historically never been able to really use. But he's one of the best coaches in the entire NFL. And if there's anyone who can re-unlock Newton's potential, it's going to be Belichick.
And this is an offense by Josh McDaniels that is designed to fit a player of Newton's ability. The only question, though, and I think this is everybody's biggest question, is can Cam stay healthy? Can he stay healthy enough to run this system based on the injuries that have plagued him for the last few years? And we'll just have to see. While we keep saying, yes, he's a former NFL MVP, can he play at that MVP-type caliber? That's going to be the big question mark for the Patriots heading into the season. Not to mention their offensive question marks, but defensively, the Patriots lost a ton of star power in the offseason.
Absolutely. They had Kyle Van Noy, Daron Harmon, but they still do have some of the better players on the defense in reigning Defensive Player of the Year and former Gamecock Stephon Gilmore. And I think a guy who could be a breakout player on that defense is J.C. Jackson. He was a very well graded young cornerback coming out of Maryland a couple years ago. I think he could really take a step on a defense that's getting a lot older.
It's going to be an exciting season over in the AFC East, whether it be the Bills or the Pats or maybe a surprise Dolphins or Jets team. That division is definitely not under lock and key as it has been for the last 15 years or so with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Staying in the AFC, but going into the AFC South. Now, this is a division that has a few mediocre teams. Really, not one stands out among the rest. Let's start over with the Houston Texans. Obviously, Deshaun Watson getting paid the big bucks this week by the Texans with a big extension. They also add David Johnson, a nice veteran running back in the offseason, but they lose DeAndre Hopkins, one of the top receivers in the league. They trade him over to Arizona. What do you expect from Houston this season, knowing what they bring back, but also what they lost in Hopkins?
Well, I mean, it's going to be really difficult for the Texans to replicate their former success. I mean, Deshaun Watson is, in my opinion, a top 5 young quarterback in this league, but he was definitely buoyed by the fact that DeAndre Hopkins is one of probably the top 3 best receivers in the league. They replace him with Brandon Cooks and David Johnson. That's not exactly the most awe-inspiring skill group. They've got weaknesses at tight end. There's still questions on offensive line. And if Will Fuller can stay healthy, he might make an impact, but that's a pretty big if, because recently, I don't think he's played a 16-game slate. I think really the Texans are going to get capped at probably around 9 or 10 wins.
You know, another big question mark over in the AFC South has to do with the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, they've had their own quarterback struggles here in recent years, but they think they found the guy in Phillip Rivers at 38 years old. The biggest question mark for Rivers, though, coming over from his long-time stay with the Chargers, is how much does he have left in the tank at 38?
Honestly, I'm not sure, but looking at Indianapolis' roster, I'm not sure he has to have a whole lot in the tank. Indianapolis has got one of the best offensive lines in the league. You've got Quentin Nelson, who might be the best guard in the league. You throw in a lot of running backs, including one of my favorite draft picks from this year, Jonathan Taylor. And, you know, they've got a lot of talent at tight end. They've got some good wide receivers in T.Y. Hilton. And they've got an up-and-coming defense. If Phillip Rivers just manages to keep the ball in the hands of the offense, hand off to the running back, and occasionally throw an intermediate route, the Colts can be a really good team this year.
I think you bring up a good point there. The Colts are a dream scenario for Phillip Rivers. They want their offense mainly controlled by the running backs, Marlon Mack, Jonathan Taylor, even Nyheim Hines. A big workhorse load there for those 3 guys. So the offense is mainly going to be controlled by the running game, not to mention Quentin Nelson charging the way up at the offensive line. The occasional deep throw to T.Y. Hilton or Paris Campbell, maybe, and the occasional 3rd and short throw underneath to Nyheim Hines. That's really all they're expecting out of Phillip Rivers. The main component he was brought in for was his leadership, I think, to develop these young players. Like you said, I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be a great player, a tremendous, tremendous draft pick by Indy. But he's going to need that veteran to kind of help him guide along the way, because Indy's a very young team, but they're a very talented team as well. I think Phillip Rivers coming in as that veteran presence is going to pay off big time for them. Now, staying in the AFC South, we talk about a team that really doesn't have very high expectations this season. A bunch of people are expecting them to even make a run at the #1 overall draft pick. That's the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, Gardner Minshew, he's a very likable guy. Does that make Jacksonville good? Absolutely not. And that's the problem right now with Jacksonville. Looking at the Jags, what do you expect, if anything at all, out of Gardner Minshew and the Jags?
To be completely honest, once they released Leonard Fournette, my expectations for the Jacksonville plummeted. I really honestly thought that they could make a competition for maybe 3 or 4 wins just behind Fournette, because he's one of the better young backs in the league. But now, looking at their running back room, they've got Raquel Armstead, who they drafted out of Temple, and that's basically it. They've got no talent at running back, negligible talent at wide receiver and tight end, and Gardner Minshew, as much as I personally do love him as a quarterback, I think he could be pretty decent in the league, he's got a very hard ceiling, and I think that's capping the Jacksonville Jaguars from being overly competitive.
The final question mark, though, for the AFC South is going to be Tennessee and the Titans is how does Ryan Tannehill follow up his incredible breakout performance last season? Is he a one-hit wonder? How do they move forward? That's going to be a big question mark to see as we wrap up the AFC South. Staying in the NFC, but going up north, and what holds the NFL MVP from last season, Lamar Jackson, as he broke the single-season rushing record for the NFL by a quarterback, not to mention throwing 36 touchdown passes, an incredible year last year for Lamar Jackson. Can he keep up that production this year for the Ravens?
I think he can still be productive, but everything that Baltimore and Jackson himself have been saying is that he's not going to run the ball as much this season. He's going to try and focus and improve as a passer, which I personally think is a terrifying idea. Because if Lamar Jackson can get more accurate and still run the ball, 4 or 5 times a game, he's Mike Vick. He's basically unstoppable. You throw in a really great running back rotation with the young players like J.K. Dobbins, who I really liked coming out of Ohio State. They're fast at every position. They got Pro Bowlers at almost all levels. they're going to be the team to beat besides the Kansas City Chiefs.
The only question mark I have for this Ravens team is going to be on the offensive line. They had their right guard, Marshall Yanda, retire in the offseason. How do they replace him and protect that side of Jackson? Staying in the AFC, wrapping it up for this episode of The Locker Room, let's go to the AFC West. We go from the AFC North, who has the reigning NFL MVP, to the AFC West, who has the reigning Super Bowl champion in the Kansas City Chiefs. Finished 12 wins last year, and it is a great time to be a Chiefs fan. It truly is. You've got Patrick Mahomes, now a $500 million man. You've got Travis Kelce locked in for a number of years now with a big contract extension, plus a number of other guys signed through at least 2023. So this Chiefs team, they're young, they're good, and they're there to stay for the next couple of years.
Absolutely. And, they've got Andy Reid, who might be one of the best offensive minds of the last 25 to 30 years in football, and a great young running back in Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who Patrick Mahomes personally picked in the first round of the draft. I mean, he can line up in the slot. He can take the ball out of the running back position. He's good in the open field. He reminds me a lot of Brian Westbrook from his glory days in Philly.
The thing about Clyde Edwards-Helaire is this. You look back to last season, the incumbent starter was Damian Williams. And a lot of us thought at the end of the first round, well, why would they draft a running back when you have Damian Williams coming back? Unbeknownst to all of us, Damian Williams has opted out for this upcoming season. You look at the backup running back from last year, LaShawn McCoy, he's now in Tampa Bay with Tom Brady. So that's a full open running back slot for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I fully expect, I don't think 1,600 yards is an unattainable number for Helaire this upcoming season. I really, really don't. You look back last year, Williams and McCoy in a split back system garnered 1,300 together. Do you think 1,600's an out of the question number?
I don't think that's out of the question whatsoever. I mean, looking at his talent at LSU, how well he was able to catch the ball out of the backfield, I think he might be better than Williams in that area. And plus, he's a good, rugged, bowling ball of a running back. I think, with that offense, how electric it is, how open the field is going to be, because you have to respect Mahomes' arm, you're going to be looking at, honestly, I think 1,600 yards is perfectly attainable.
It's going to be an exciting season, especially over in the AFC. Final question for you, Connor, and I think it may be a pretty easy one. Who do you think is the AFC champion at the end of the season?
The AFC champion is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs.
Back-to-back AFC titles. I can't say I disagree with you on that one. It's a great time to be a Chiefs fan, especially with your $500 million quarterback under center. Well, folks, that wraps up this edition of Locker Room This Week. Connor, thank you for joining us this week.
So glad to be here.
Folks, stay tuned. Another episode next week breaking down the NFC of this upcoming NFL season, and it's good to have football fact, folks. For Connor Fisher, I'm Cade Crenshaw. You've been watching The Locker Room, and we'll see you next week.